Sadhguru Shribrahma. It is truly astonishing just how much he managed to travel and remain involved in social causes in the short decade he was active. What is more surprising is to see the extent of terrain he covered, right from the south to the Himalayas. In the southern region, we have seen his work in the states of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. Now let's go to the state of Kerala, where Sadhguru's presence is more than obvious. We were invited to a Guru Puja which was taking place near Kannur in Kerala. The Guru Puja was in honor of Sri Narayana Guru, and the pictures of Sadhguru Shribrahma and Bhagwan Nityananda of Ganeshpuri occupied a prominent place in the invite. Sri Narayana Guru was a social reformer and a Siddha who had drawn praise from Rabindranath Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi as a remarkable and great yogi. Movies have been made on his life journey. This spiritual seeker who traveled places and followed austere practices went on to set up an organization called the Sri Narayana Dharma Paripalana Yogam, SNDPY. SNDPY introduced a whole spiritual movement to society. The SNDPY was set up in 1903 and the Sharada Math was set up in 1912 in Sivagiri, the campus of Sri Narayana Guru's Samadhi. There are no official records of Sadhguru's and Narayana Guru's meetings, but here at Kanyakumari near Kannur, Sadhguru Shribrahma's photo is a permanent fixture which is also found on all Guru Puja invites along with verses added from Jivakanni. In 1888, Sri Narayana Guru first consecrated a linga at the Arivipuram temple. Coming from the Ezhava community, this was opposed by the Brahmins of that time. Narayana Guru said his now famous words, "Yours is a Brahmana Shiva and mine is an Ezhava Shiva." He went on to consecrate and establish more than 80 temples all around Kerala in his lifetime. His efforts prevented religious conversions from happening to a great extent. The other photograph that was mentioned was of Bhagwan Nityananda of Ganeshpuri. We were told by Kerala Swami, a resident here, that Sadhguru Shribrahma was connected to Bhagwan Nityananda also. Bhagwan Nityananda was found as an infant under mysterious circumstances in a forest area of Kerala. He showed signs of mystical behavior right since childhood. In an old photograph, he is seated in the lap of Vadagara Sivananda. Those who have watched the first episode of this series may recollect Vadagara Sivananda's connection with Manavai Siddhar. In Kanjangad, Bhagwan Nityananda made caves by carving a laterite mound so that people could sit and meditate. These caves are maintained even today. After spending time here for almost 23 years, he shifted to Ganeshpuri outside Mumbai, where he eventually took Samadhi at the age of 63. Kerala Swami visits Ganeshpuri every Guru Purnami, knowing that Sadhguru Shribrahma has visited both Ganeshpuri and Vajreshwari. He does not reveal any further information and prefers silence on the subject. There is a written record by a devotee that says Sadhguru Shribrahma had visited the Padmanabha Swami temple in Thiruvananthapuram. The local legend says that sage Agastya Muni took Samadhi in the sanctum at the feet of Lord Padmanabha Swami, and it was only natural for Sadhguru to have come to that place. Thiruvananthapuram being close to Agastya Kudam, Sadhguru could have come down also because of other reasons. Attukal Bhagavati temple is a very powerful kshetra where Chattambi Swami meditated for a long time. Chattambi Swami and Sri Narayana Guru, as per their Guru Taikadayya's instructions, have done tapas in Maruthuval hill where they are said to have gotten enlightened. Chattambi Swami is also known as Vidyadi Raja because of his literary proficiency in Malayalam, Tamil and Sanskrit. He is said to have become an erudite soul after spending time in Tamil Nadu, where he met a wandering sage who initiated him into the Bala Subramanya Mantra Diksha. He mastered Siddha Vaidyam and other sciences which he later taught to Sri Narayana Guru. Chattambi Swami also introduced him to his Guru Taikadayya. Taikadayya worked as a superintendent at the treasury of the King of Travancore and was a legend in the Shivaraja Yoga during those times. We will look at Taikadaya in the next episode on Manavai Siddhar. One can take an educated guess that Sadhguru Shribrahma's interactions with Sri Narayana Guru and Chattambi Swamigal may have concerned social upliftment by spiritual processes. In Kerala, they were anyway following the practice of Annadanam and Samabandhi Bhojanam on a very large scale as per its propagation by Sadhguru in Tamil Nadu. This story is put on record by a devotee. Sadhguru used to sit outside the Mariamman temple in Ooty. People came to take a darshan of the goddess and Sadhguru. They would bring milk, tender coconut, honey, boiled chenna, pongal, fruits and flowers as offerings. Sadhguru would gesture to them to keep it on the side. If they had ailments, he would tell them, say Om Sadhguruve Nama, apply the vibhuti on your forehead and put some in your mouth. He would sit unmoving for hours, mostly in silence and sometimes talking to people. Sadhguru never ate the offerings that were brought for him. In fact, in the sharing it says he never ate. It is also mentioned that Nallasamy Naidu and P. Muthuswamy spent 3 months with Sadhguru, and in that period they never once saw him eat or attend nature's call. A few times a day, he would get up, jump and throw his arms and legs in the air as if to stretch. He would walk around the temple 2-3 times and again come and return to his place. They would even follow him when he moved to see whether he ate at all, but they only found him to walk a bit and come back to sit quietly. There is another incident that concerns the Dharmasthala Manjunatha Swami temple while Sadhguru stayed at the Mariamman temple in Ooty. Maintained for 21 generations, the Sri Kshetra Dharmasthala is a Shiva temple with Vaishnava priests and administered by Jain descendants. One day at 11:50 in the morning, Sadhguru Shribrahma received a message. The message said that Sadhguru had to conduct a satsang in Dharmasthala at noon. The message had arrived late due to the messenger boy, and the temple was not close enough to reach within 10 minutes. So Sadhguru instructed Nallasamy Naidu to not allow anyone to touch his body or garland him. He then said, Sadhguru is going for the satsang, and he broke a root which he had in hand and closed eyes. At 12:30, Nallasamy Naidu received news from Dharmasthala that Sadhguru had attended the satsang and given a talk. Nallasamy further shared that the organizers had arranged a horse carriage to drop Sadhguru back to Ooty, and he approached it only to disappear in an instant. He then reappeared in Ooty in a meditative state where he opened his eyes and said, Sadhguru is back. Even though there are systematically maintained records of all events at Dharmasthala, we could not meet the authorities to access further details. Kukke Subramanya, close to Dharmasthala, is a powerful place associated with Kartikeya or Murugan, who is second in line in the Guru Parampara of Sadhguru Shribrahma. It is one of the 6 houses referred to as Arupadai Veedu, the remaining 5 being in Tamil Nadu. According to Professor K. Appadurayar, this place is referred to as Palamudir Solai in the ancient Tamil texts. Murugan was an unmatched warrior trained by Agastya Muni. He finally reached a point of realization that fighting and killing will not change the injustice in the world and decided to give up violence forever. He washed his spear at Kumaradhara and kept it here. Then he went up to the mountain and left his body standing. The intensity of his samadhi was so strong that the smallest of stones and pebbles took a 6-faced shape, that of Shanmukha Lingas, depicting the upright energy. It is highly probable that Sadhguru Shribrahma spent some time here. The elders of Yam Suppalapuram had told us that they had heard Ramasamy Adigal mention that Sadhguru Shribrahma had gone to a place called Tata Maidan in Mumbai. A devotee's daughter was getting married and Sadhguru is said to have attended it. They also said that a group photograph was published in a local newspaper in which Sadhguru was seen wearing a turban. The information was not enough to find the photograph, But we did manage to identify Tata Maidan, which used to be in the lower Parel area near the present Bara Devi shrine. This is an ancient 11 feet high 7-faced Shiva statue which was unearthed only in 1931. There are the ancient temples of Bageshwari Devi and Chandika Devi temples nearby. Great festivities were held on the Golanji hills on Nag Panchami days. Unfortunately, it is a slum today with no trace of the Naga shrine. However, the surrounding area is a part of heritage tour walks in Mumbai. The other places around Mumbai and associated with Sadhguru Shribrahma and mentioned by Kerala Swami are Ganeshpuri and Vajreshwari. Vajreshwari has mentions in the Puranas. Parashuram is said to have done a grand yagna here, the remnants of which are seen as volcanic rocks and hot water springs. The whole area is referred to as Nath Bhumi because of its association with many Nath yogis. A police officer from Coimbatore, who was earlier posted in the Himalayas, shared a story with Sadhguru's disciple Nallasamy Naidu. The officer said that he saw a picture of Sadhguru Shribrahma published in an English newspaper in the Himalayas. The picture depicted Sadhguru sitting near a big Nandi statue, surrounded by devotees gathered for his darshan. He said that the article mentioned Sadhguru was returning from his visit to Kailash, where he was doing tapas for 12 days. When we stayed with some Babas in the Himalayas, we were told that there is a shorter route to Kailash mountain from Kedarnath and Badrinath that cut through the glaciers and which only highly accomplished sadhus would take to go to Kailash. Kedarnath and Guptakashi have statues of big Nandis. Guptakashi is the place where most sadhus came down to stay during the winter months when it froze up in the mountains. You might recollect how the young Chinnu, who went on to become Swami Chidbhavananda, would meet Sadhguru Swamigal in the streets of Parani. We learned that his very first trip was with his friend, who was the son of a zamindar in Coimbatore. His name was M.R.N. Kalingarayar and he was from the Oothukuli zamindar family. Interestingly, to this day, whenever there is a wedding in this family, the word Sadhguru is attached to the bride and groom's name. When we asked the descendants about this tradition, they were clueless about their ancestral connection to Sadhguru Shribrahma. We also learned that Swami Chidbhavananda's father was also an initiate of Sadhguru Shribrahma. He had sponsored the Parani shrine of Sadhguru Shribrahma at Brahmatirtham, and that his grandson C. Subramaniam, who later became the education minister, had the Sadhguru schools built in Kunnur much later. Satti Swamigal's ashram is adjacent to Sadhguru Shribrahma's shrine in Parani and was built before Sadhguru's Jalasamadhi in the Brahmatirtham water tank. And so Satti Swamigal had offered a part of his ashram land to Sadhguru Shribrahma to stay. Satti Swamigal also has an ashram in Uttarakosamangai. The temple here is known to be the oldest existing temple in Tamil Nadu with a 6 feet emerald Nataraja. The older generation at Supalapuram had told us that Sadhguru had been to another close by temple when he came to Rameshwaram and that he had stayed with the royal family in Uttarakosamangai. Whether it was the Oothukuli Zamindar family or the royal family in Ramnad district, or whether it was the Adivasi tribals of the jungles, Sadhguru's interactions were across a wide social spectrum. The very first copy of Jiva Kanni was published in 1912 by Ayyasamy Udayar of Vellanur near Trichy. It only had Ananda Kalippu in it. In 1915, under the title of Thiruppadal Thirattu, a book was published with compilations of Arutpolambal, Tiruppugal, Sadhguru Kanni, Jiva Kanni and other verses related to Raja Yoga. It was compiled by T.M. Ponnusamy Pillai from Varaganeri, Tiruchirappalli. He may have been an initiate of Sadhguru Shribrahma. Not much is known about him, although there were 2 people by the same name who were famous writers during that period. We were happy that we got to see the first edition of the compilation. Thiruppadal Thirattu is completely in Tamil, with its highest yogic and spiritual aspects sounding cryptical. A translation would only destroy the essence of what is being said in these verses. We have chosen only the simplest verses from Jiva Kanni for each episode. The printed version of the Thirupadal Thirattu is available at the Sadhguru Shribrahma ashrams. We did not find any references that pointed to Sadhguru being in Madurai, even though his granddaughter did repeatedly mention that he had been there. Then Vijay Kumar came across a book by a mystic yogi from Sri Lanka whose name was Brahma Shri Sheikh Naina Muhammad, or Talayan Swami as he was popularly known. He never accepted food for free, and so once while he was working as a caretaker of a cremation ground in Madurai, he was up singing Tayumanavar songs all night. When he stopped singing, he heard a commanding voice saying, "Continue singing," and he also heard him clap once. As the voice neared, Talayan Swami saw that it was a yogi of highest order and that the Tayumanavar songs made him ecstatic. From his description of the yogi in his book and his book's beginning that starts with a verse dedicated to Sadhguru Swamigal, along with the salutation Om Shri Sadhguruve Namaha, it can be assumed that Talayan Swami had an encounter with Sadhguru Shribrahma in Madurai. Kuppamma used to take food for Sadhguru Shribrahma when he came to M. Suppalapuram and stayed in the palm groves outside the village. She later became his disciple after getting initiated. The elders had mentioned that all the disciples passed away in their sleep when they were old and still healthy, and their samadhis are around the village. We went looking for Kuppamma's samadhi. We also found another samadhi in the village behind the temple. N. Krishnasamy is said to be the first person to get initiated in M. Suppalapuram. Every year, it is customary for the Guru Puja procession to start from this samadhi. Closer to Maruthuval Malai near Kanyakumari, we learnt about a family that offered Guru Puja to a statue of Sadhguru Shribrahma instead of the customary photograph, and we found it interesting to visit them. The statue was a Panchalogam statue. Although what was shared with us did not match our own dates and findings, we did find out that his uncle would offer Annadanam and conduct a Guru Puja in the presence of this statue in Lalgudi near Trichy. Since they shifted to Anjigramam, they conducted a special puja annually at home on Thiruvonam only for their family members. When we first interviewed people at the birth village of Sadhguru Shribrahma, Naduvapatti, we were told that he would often visit his elder sister in Puliyambatti. They also mentioned a temple where he stayed. When we reached Puliyambatti near Arupukottai, we found the temple right at the entry junction alongside several other ancient temples. We were told that there are samadhis of 7 siddhars who established their respective temples and took samadhi there. We came back to Naduvapatti village from where the journey of Sadhguru Shribrahma had begun. In the first episode, we had spoken about the incident where Sadhguru Shribrahma went into samadhi after having given detailed instructions not to be disturbed. But the disbelief of the people and a few misleading rumors had made them open the arrangement and interrupt his samadhi. This had forced him to leave the village in a certain state of intensity and anger. The villagers were guilty for their actions, and they also left the village when year after year rains held back. By the time we visited the village some years ago, it was absolutely deserted. Now, after more than 100 years since this incident, the granddaughters and the villagers came together and built a temple for Sadhguru Shribrahma in 2015 near the spot where he had attempted samadhi. They have been conducting Guru Puja and Annadanam here for the last 8 years, and the village has resumed its normalcy.
வரமாட்டனு கோச்சிட்டு போயிட்டாரு. திருப்பி அதே இடத்துக்கு வந்துட்டாரு பாருங்க. பாத்தீங்கன்னா அப்படி நல்லா இருக்கு இந்த ஊரு. மழை ஊரு கொஞ்சம் நல்லா இருக்கு. சாயந்தரான ஜனங்கள்லாம் வந்து இருக்க.
In their understanding, their Sadhguru who had left their village 110 years ago has returned, and they reconciled with their actions of their ancestors. They remain proud of the fact that their Sadhguru is being celebrated and worshipped by thousands of people in so many parts of Tamil Nadu. In the next episode, we will close the circle by exploring the interaction and connection between Sadhguru Shribrahma and Manavai Siddhar. After all, we can't lose sight of how this journey began. We will look at how I got answers to some deep and nagging questions that were a mystery at the beginning of this series. All this and more in our upcoming concluding episode.